Hello everybody, CVH here, and today we're back with part 2 of our Heroes of Skyrim full set review, and we're going to be focusing on intelligence today. So, let's start off with Studious Greybeard. 1 cost 0 Nord. At the start of your turn, look at the top card of your deck, and you may discard it. So, this can sort of allow you to filter a little bit easier through your deck and get rid of some draws you don't like. This is one of the more complex cards of the set. It's clearly built for combo decks. It's clearly not an aggressive card at all. It does require a bit of effort from your opponent to kill it. It has 4 health, but that said, it's never really going to trade for free. You're never getting the value back from this card. I don't think we currently have a combo deck that really wants to play this card. I think it's a little bit too slow and a little bit too... I don't know, I just want to say bad, like, you just lose value. You never really replace itself. You're not getting any card advantage whatsoever. You're just filtering a little bit through your deck. But this card is also a terrible top deck later in the game for those kinds of combo decks. So as it stands, I don't really see a deck that really wants to use this card. In Arena, this card is completely bad. There's virtually no redeeming because you're not playing a combo deck in Arena. You're basically trying to kill your opponent in a reasonable amount of time. In Constructed, I just don't think a deck supports it quite yet, but maybe something with Reanimation comes to light in the future. As of right now, I'm going to avoid this card in most decks. Next, we have Embassy Guard. 2 costs 0/4 Prophecy, Guard, and Ward. So we have Evermore Steward, which is a 1/1 with Guard and Ward, and now this card has Prophecy, but no attack value at all. That said, this card could be potentially good if you can buff it. For a strictly defensive deck that wants to live as long as possible, this card could be very annoying. It gets executed for sure, it gets silenced for sure, but from a Prophecy, this card could eat a tremendous amount of damage. 2 attacks have to get into it, one that gets rid of the ward, the other that gets rid of the 4 health. At the very least, you're going to be eating that much damage. So, I mean, it's very, very good at being defensive. At the moment, I don't really see a deck that wants a strictly defensive card like this. But again, this card could be good in some sort of meme deck, so you could play this in maybe a Sorcerer with, I don't know, Ring of Imaginary Might, buffing this card up a bit. That could be pretty sick. I'm not really seeing this in too many Constructed decks currently. And again, in Arena, yeah, you can buff it, but you don't really want 0/4s, period. So again, I don't think the card is too powerful. Arcane Enchanter, ongoing support. When you draw an item, give it a random keyword. I'm not sure if there are enough items that are played currently for this to be good. You don't want to play as an item sorcerer, just too inconsistent. Yeah, you could give items lethal or drain, and that's pretty sick, but what deck really has enough items for that? Maybe some sort of item battle mage deck? Maybe that could come to light in the future. We see this with cards like Alakir Survivalist and other things that draw items, Crown Quartermaster and stuff. Maybe in that kind of deck, but it has to be really dedicated to get the value out of this. In Arena, it's bad, not enough items in your deck. In Constructed, it has to be a very specific type of deck, and I don't think that deck's going to be quite good enough. Dark Rebirth, sacrifice a creature and summons a copy of it. This is very good with anything with last gasp effects. Things like Deshaan Avenger, things like, I don't know, Eclipse Baroness comes to mind. Besides that, it's going to be reusing the summon effect of these cards, so if it has a last gasp and a summon effect, it gets even better, like the Eclipse Baroness does. Tons of value with that card. I'm seeing this in potentially a Necrom Mastermind Assassin deck. Those decks haven't been traditionally too good. Maybe this card could give it some added versatility. Besides that, not too many targets in the average Constructed deck currently for Dark Rebirth. Cool card, though. I really do like the card design. Fire Breath is the intelligence shout from the set. Level 2 is deal 4 damage, level 3 is deal 10 damage, all to a creature, obviously. If it was to face, it'd be a different story. I think the jury of my peers has universally decided that this card just isn't quite worth the inconsistency of having a level 3 or a 3 cost deal 2 damage to a creature in your deck. Potentially for a deck with heavy cycle, like Stealer of Secrets OTK, you could get to the higher levels of the shouts quicker, but the card's power level is just generally kind of low. Boomslight even said when we first saw this card that he thought it was even worse than the red shout that we were discussing, Unrelenting Force, in the strength version of the video. I don't think this card is quite as bad as people make it out to be. I just don't think it's really worth it in anything. Level 3 deal 10 damage to a creature. It seems powerful, but even as a Piercing Javelin, if we consider that a Piercing Javelin type of effect, it's still only slightly undercosted. It's never going to be insane and kill like multiple things. It's just going to, at best, kill something. So I'm not super on board with this, just because it's a little overcosted at the start. And there's so many good removal options already in the game. Next is Ghost Seal Lookout. 3 cost 4/2. When you summon a dragon, it gains a ward. So obviously, you're not going to be playing this in too many decks that aren't packed with dragons. Within a dragon deck, though, this card could be very powerful. Gaining ward is objectively one of the best keywords in the game, helps you trade, helps your things stick around and go face for more. Tested this card a bit already, and I did like it, but I was playing a very dragon-heavy deck. I don't anticipate anyone touching this card outside of those decks, but if you're playing a heavy dragon deck in Intelligence, it seems like almost an automatic inclusion, just a powerful 3-drop, and something you kind of want to have on the board to help you trade. Master Swordsmith, at the start of your turn, give each item in your deck +1/+1. This one's kind of tricky because that's actually a pretty significant buff if you're playing a lot of items. The decks that run the most items currently are probably just Item Sorcerer with 3 Tomes and 3 Maces, but maybe we see more items in the future and in different kinds of decks. They're trying to push that whole item battle mage kind of deck, obviously, but a lot of the best cards that give you items are like, they're just that. They're cards that give you items. They're not actually playing those items in your deck. And this card does not have good stats for a 3 cost, and in order for you to get any value out of the card whatsoever, it has to live a turn, and then you have to draw well. So a little bit inconsistent for my taste, personally. Revealing the Unseen. Wow, this card has a beautiful premium art that I'm just now seeing for the first time. It's a shame it's attached to this card. There are some random cards in this set, I'll give it that. So 3 cost, put 2 random actions into your hand. Not the worst card from a value standpoint, you are +1ing, but not as good as Telvanni Arcanist, which is thus just a body with 1 random action on the last gasp. You'd rather have the consistency that a body provides in virtually anything. In a Stealer of Secrets OTK, exactly. I keep bringing that deck up because it's a very specific type of deck that wants to dump actions into this card pile. So check out that video if you haven't seen the Stealer of Secrets OTK. But in that deck, I like this card. In virtually any other deck, it's just too inconsistent. In a slow control deck, you have time to play it, but you have so much better ways and more consistent ways of getting value, I think. Even Telvanni is better in those decks, I'm pretty sure. I could see it maybe being a one-up in certain slow decks. I mean, I hope this card doesn't see too much play because the effect can be kind of upsetting to lose to. In Arena, maybe? I don't know, there are a lot of worse rares, but there are a lot of really bad actions out there, guys. There's a lot of good ones too, but I don't really want to put this card in my deck and just roll the dice when I can play better actions, period. So I probably will just leave it in the collection and keep my premium copy to look at every now and then, because it is probably one of like the top 5 or 10 premium arts in the game. Like, wow, that's very beautiful. Thalmor Embassy, ongoing support. Your high elves cost 1 less, you can't be damaged by actions. So no lightning bolts to the face. That didn't really save Stampede Sentinel, and that card has a huge body. And the high elf thing, I looked him up. We don't have like enough high elves, I think, for a real high elf deck. The card seems a little bit lackluster currently. This is a card, though, that could get a lot better over time if that kind of deck ever gets more support. This card could easily slot into that, because anything that makes anything cost less Magicka deserves a second glance at least. I've seen people test it already. Didn't seem too great, but maybe in the future. This is just an investment in the future type of card. Vigilant of Stendarr. Not much to say. 3 cost 5/2. Pretty trashy and constructed, and not ideal in Arena, but okay enough. 3 cost 5/2 is okay enough in Arena. And another really nice premium art. The blue premium arts this set look really good, I have to say. And this is no exception. Dragon's Fury deals 3 to a creature and 3 extra damage for each friendly dragon. On the surface, I've tested this just a bit with the dragons we know exist, and this seems like an auto-include in any dragon deck using Intelligence, and it looks like we're going to see a few decks that use Intelligence with a fair amount of dragons in them. Going to get into the dragons in just a few cards. Outside of that, worse than Lightning Bolt, worse than a lot of other removal cards like Crushing Blow 2, so I wouldn't touch the card, but if you're running, I don't know, 9 to 12 plus dragons, this card could get out of hand very quickly. If you have 1 dragon on the board, that's already 4 cost, deals 6 to a creature. Card is very powerful in the right deck. And probably not too powerful in Arena because you're not going to have that many dragons consistently, but 4 cost, deal 3 damage is not the worst card I can imagine. J'zargo. The highly anticipated J'zargo is in Heroes of Skyrim. 4 cost 3/4 with Summon. Put an experimental scroll into your hand. What is an experimental scroll? Don't worry which one it is, just give it a try. So I'll tell you which ones they are. I don't have a fancy image to put on the screen or anything. Oh, I've been disconnected, so let me get back into the collection in just a second. When you play the experimental scroll, it is a 4 cost action in your hand that states, do one of the following 3 things at random. And the 3 things are, number 1, give each of your creatures 2 random keywords. That's right, it's like a double Royal Sage. The second one is deal 2 damage to each of your opponent's creatures. And the third one is deal 5 damage to you and your opponent. So that's objectively probably the worst one unless you're an aggro deck, which means it could possibly be the best one. All of these effects are pretty nuts in the correct circumstance. You don't have control over which one happens. Deal 2 damage to all enemy creatures, it's great. One-sided Firestorm. Double Whirl Sage is obviously great on all of your guys, and then deal 5 damage to each player. Kind of the riskiest one, especially if you're, getting beaten down and you can really have to rely on the keywords helping you out or the deal 2 damage helping you out. That said, J'zargo, I don't know, I feel like this card's going to see play. I feel like those effects are just powerful enough to warrant J'zargo seeing play. The keyword doubling thing, that's just actually pretty crazy to me. 4 cost, 3/4, it's not great. It is a unique legendary though, so it's pretty easy to slot this one of in maybe a control mage deck, maybe some assassin mid-range deck. I feel like this card's going to see play. I feel like it's going to give a lot of keywords, and that 2 damage to everything, just the fact that neither you nor your opponent can predict what happens, makes this a pretty volatile card. I'm not exactly sure what to think about it right now, but I'd be shocked if it doesn't see at least some amount of play. It's just playable enough to be really scary in my opinion. Let's move on to Mistveil Enchanter. Gains +2/+0 if you have another creature with ward. I'm not seeing this card be powerful enough. 4/2 with ward at best, which is exactly what the 3 cost is if you play a dragon. Granted, this is immediate, but yeah, I don't think this really competes with other 4-drops too well. If you're really focusing on wards, though, I guess that could be something they're trying to push with hiking Emmerich and everything. So yeah, maybe in like Wardcrafter, Windkeep Spellsword, Mistveil Enchanter, maybe this is actually good enough in that deck if you're really packing on the wards. So I won't write it off completely. It does compete with a lot of good other 4-cost cards, but yeah, maybe this card could be pretty good in the mid-range Sorcerer's Shell. I wouldn't play it in most other decks, but in mid-range Sorcerer could use this card actually. Mystic Dragon, 4-cost, 4/4 with Prophecy, one of the best cards in the set in my opinion. This card can really make a dragon deck come alive, just such a beating if you get it for free off of one of your rune breaks. 4/4 of stats, even without an immediate impactful effect. It's like the second largest Prophecy creature to tier. The reason Moonlight Werebat was such a problem at 4/3 was that it can trade with something and stay alive to trade with 2 things. Just an absolute nightmare for your aggressive opponent to see if they're breaking your runes, and you get this on turn 2 or turn 3, even without Drain, even without Guard. So yeah, I expect this card will see a fair bit of play, and probably not just in Dragon decks, possibly even in aggro Battle Mage, where it is one of the biggest prophecies you can play, which means it's one of the biggest free swings of tempo you can get off of one of your own runes being destroyed. Just an all-around pretty fantastic card, I would say. And yeah, definitely amazing in Arena, a common, so you're going to be seeing this card a ton. Moving on to Riften Pickpocket. Summon reveal 3 random cards in your opponent's deck, choose one and draw a copy of it. This card strikes me as incredibly powerful in a control mirror match. It's not overcosted, it's not too understated. Well, I mean, the stats are definitely not good for a 4 cost, but the value you can get from this card is pretty extreme. Will it replace Elusive Schemer? I don't know. Obviously, you like the consistency of drawing cards from your own deck, but this card isn't weak to pings. It's pretty bad against aggro decks because you're not stealing cards that you want to be using, but anything that strictly gains you cards is bad against aggro decks. You want to be surviving against those. Against a slower deck, you could pick and choose out of the 3. You're likely to get something pretty powerful. So yeah, I think this card could potentially find its way into some control decks using intelligence. Any other deck that really focuses on, board pressure and killing your opponent, stats are probably just too bad to warrant it, but I expect that card to see play. And pretty powerful in Arena too. Definitely pretty powerful in Arena, I would say, despite the stats not being great. College of Winterhold I talked about a bit in my first impressions videos before. Doesn't seem too consistent, seems like a pretty weak use of 5 Magicka, so I will probably write this off as not too playable. Really cool card design, I like this card a lot. Theoretically, you could use it with that card that gives you infinite uses of your supports to potentially scale upwards and then get 4 and 5 cost actions. But realistically, not thinking this card is too consistent for a control deck, and obviously nowhere near what you want to be doing in a more aggressive deck. So here we have Court Wizard, which is the intelligence. Draw a card if you have 2 other intelligence creatures. 5-drop, 3/5, really slow stat-wise. It is pushing mono blue, but I don't really think this is a card that would be necessary for a deck that's heavy into blue, because blue just has really good ways to draw cards and add cards to your hand. So yeah, while it could potentially draw you a card in Arena or something, I don't think a constructed deck really wants to be using this as their turn 5 play. But, I like that they're doing this for every single color. I do, but I don't really think that is the best one at all of them, because this blue just doesn't need it, in my opinion. Insightful Scholar. Prophecy, draw a card for each card your opponent drew this turn. Interesting card. My initial thoughts are that it's pretty weak, but in aggro battle mage with a bunch of prophecies, it could be decent because if you're getting this off a prophecy, it'll draw you a card. 5 cost 2/3 prophecy, draw a card. If it's your opponent's turn, if your opponent's turn and they're breaking your runes, it could potentially draw even more if you're destroying a lot of their runes in the same turn, because that's counting as drawing a card, right? You destroy one of their runes, they draw a card from their deck. If it has prophecy, they can play it for free. So if you do a bunch of attacks and give them 2 runes, you can play this card and draw 2 cards. Still kind of bad compared to Triumphant Jarl, but it does have prophecy. Realistically, I don't think this card's going to see a whole lot of play, but I think it's pretty interesting in exactly that kind of deck. Besides that, I don't think this is exactly what you want to be playing in a control deck. Too weak, too inconsistent. Now, this is a card that I think is potentially very powerful. Thief of Dreams. See a vision of 2 of your opponent's cards, so it just shows you 2 of your opponent's cards in their deck. Guess which one is in their hand. If you're right, draw a copy of it. So it'll show you 1 in their deck, 1 in their hand. Wow. 5 cost 5/5, it's reasonable. And even if you miss on this effect, you're going to know by process of elimination, like which one is in their hand, obviously. And if you hit on this effect, you know which one is in their hand, and you have that potentially very powerful card. It's like you pick the more powerful one, and you just get it in your hand, and you know that they have it. I stole an Alduin in the tests. In the test server with this card, it was pretty insane, as you might imagine. You can also make reads on what your opponent has if you think they've been holding a specific type of thing. If you see that pop up, you can sort of massage the randomness somewhat, so it's not just a coin flip. That said, even when it is a coin flip and you haven't been able to make any good reads on your opponent's hand, the fact that you could potentially get some value and you will know one of the cards in their hand is very powerful in my opinion. 5 cost 5/5. Turn 5 is a weak turn for a lot of decks. It's never been particularly strong for decks like Control Mage. Maybe even more aggressive strategies can use it. Assassin, Sorcerer, potentially Battle Mage. I think this card is very powerful. I think it offers a lot of information. I think it offers a lot of value, and all on top of a very reasonable, threatening body. So yeah, I think this card is very powerful, and I expect this to be one of the most played cards in Intelligence. So prepare to get your card stolen, guys. Bringer of Nightmares, another one with the See a Vision kind of effect. And you see a vision of a random creature, and then you must choose a creature to transform into it. Very interesting card again. 6 cost 4/4, worse than a 5 cost 5/5 by a lot, but this effect could be insane, right? This is kind of like a Wabbajack almost. You're seeing a random creature, but then you get to control where it goes after you know what the creature is, which is much more controlling than Wabbajack gives you. So if you get something insane off of this card, if it shows you a vision of, like, I don't know, an Odoving, you transform this or, you know, one of your other bad statted creatures into it, or something that's already used its summon effect. If it's something terrible, like an Enraged Mudcrab or something like that, you transform one of your opponent's threats into it. I think this card could potentially be very good. I don't exactly know where I'll test it first, and obviously I haven't tested it yet. It could just be trash. This is a card that seems pretty easy to misread, and definitely heavily rooted into RNG, of course. But I don't know. I think this card could be potentially very powerful. The stats are obviously not there, but it is going to impact the board in some pretty substantial way, I would assume, a lot of the time. If you get something with a good summon effect, you can use that on your own board. If you get something with a terrible effect, just give it to your opponent. Yeah, I don't know. This is a very, very hard one to rate, so I'm kind of going to abstain from casting my vote on this card so far. But yeah, this card could potentially be very powerful. And then Arena, I just like it. I think the effect is going to be allowing you to put something more powerful than the average Arena card on board a good amount of the time, and you can use it as some removal on your opponents if you get something bad, like I mentioned. Very unique card, though. Very, very unique. Conjuration Scholar, giving you a Frost Atronach with Guard. So we get 6/7 of stats for a 6 cost, which isn't really bad split across 2 bodies, but the 1/2 just doesn't seem very impactful at all. I'm not seeing this as a go-to 6-drop for anything really. It's unclear whether or not you get to control where this thing is played, or if it just goes in the same lane like a Falkreath Defiler. That said, I'm still not in love with this card anyway. I think there are just better 6-drops out there, but for Arena this could be a very solid take. It's a common, so I expect this card to see a good amount of play. I dig the art, not so much the premium art, but I dig the art. I just don't really think it has too much of a place in Constructed. Could be wrong on that. Dragon Priest Mask, seen a lot of hype, duplicating the summon ability, but as I mentioned in the first impression video, you're basically paying 5 to duplicate a summon ability, and you're paying 1 for the Steel Scimitar worth of stats on the item. Gotta find the exact right target for this for it to be worth it. 2 main things that people have been thinking about: Armor Rock, stealing a creature, and using it in the discard pile with Master of Arms, which seems a little bit crazy to me, just because first it has to get into the discard pile in the first place, which basically forces you to play a Palace Conspirator type of card. And then when this card comes back, you have to have a perfect discard pile with like two other or three. Yeah, you have to have 3 items plus this instead of just 2 for Master of Arms. It's unlikely you have that much of a packed discard pile playing Master of Arms. So instead of getting your 2 tomes, you get a tome and a Dragon Priest Mask, and then you get 2 other cards as well. Unclear to me whether or not that's really worth it in that kind of deck, so I think this might be an overrated card. Potentially very powerful effect, just seems a little bit slow and not necessary to me. The next card, though, we have to talk about substantially. Echo of Akatosh. Again, one of the nicer premium arts in the Heroes of Skyrim expansion, in my opinion, but that's not why we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about Echo of Akatosh because I think it's the most universally immediately hated card that I've ever seen in Legends so far. It is a Mundus Stone on a stick, except for your entire deck instead of your board or your hand. So yeah, I mean, we could debate whether this card is playable, good, OP, bad, going on and on. Obviously, this card doesn't really have any counters. You just play it, and then the rest of your deck gets marginally better or insane, depending on whether or not things get regenerate, guard, or drain, or charge, or whatever. So yeah, not loving the card design, not really sure exactly what it's doing, and Elder Scrolls Legends is a game that markets itself as a less random Hearthstone, essentially. That said, I don't personally think this card is OP. I think this card is a little bit slow. Again, in any super aggressive matchup, you're going to get punished for playing this instead of getting rewarded. If the game goes very long, it's pretty amazing. Is it the absolute best tool when the game goes long? Unclear. I think it's a little bit... obviously, it's rooted in RNG. The whole effect is just a Mundus Stone, so of course it has a lot to do with RNG. I mean, whether or not it's OP might just be irrelevant, because if they don't change this card, I think Reddit might just burn itself to the ground at that point, so it might not even be the same card as it is right now when you guys are watching this video. I wouldn't be surprised if it were changed, if it were completely reworked, if the effect just did something totally different. I wouldn't mind it either. I'm not too scared of this card destroying the game, because again, I think this card is kind of risky since it's just not doing anything on the board on turn 6, and there's a lot of things that punish that. That said, the fact that this card can feel incredibly, incredibly bad as the game drags on, and no one really has control over the outcome of some of these things, doesn't lead me to believe it should be in the game. I don't really know if I want to turn this into a debate about whether or not this should be in the game, but yeah, just certain things don't have charge for a reason, certain things don't have drain for a reason. If the game goes on, this is probably one of the most feel-bad ways to lose. But yeah, I mean, the card is pretty good. I expect to see a fair bit of play if it's not changed. In Arena, the card is also pretty nuts. So Icewing Dragon. Summon, shackle an enemy creature. It's a big dragon shrieking harpy without prophecy. The stats are pretty poor. I don't want to play this card outside of a dragon kind of deck. Even in a dragon-centric deck right now, I think I'd rather play Echo of Akatosh because it's a more powerful effect. But Icewing Dragon, I mean, if Echo of Akatosh gets changed, who knows? Icewing Dragon could be the go-to for a 6-cost intelligence dragon. I like shackling. I think it's a powerful tool to race and a powerful tool to stall against those other big dragons. I just think you get punished really, really hard for playing something with 4 health on a turn 6. But yeah, I like Icewing Dragon a fair bit in Arena. I just don't really think even in a dragon deck it's going to be too powerful. The last card we're going to be talking about, however, is quite powerful. Ancano. 8 cost 5/5, breakthrough, summon, deal 5 damage, your actions have breakthrough. I'm not even too stoked about the fact that your actions have breakthrough. I don't even think that's too crazy. If it didn't say breakthrough anywhere on the card, I think this card would still be great. It's Shocking Wamasu with +1/+1, and it deals an extra damage, and that's a big deal. Think of all the things that cost 5, or think of all the things with 5 health that you can't kill with Lightning Bolt. Thorn Hist Mage, Iron, Eclipse Baroness, Echo of Akatosh, anything new, other Ancanos. There's just so many things, and this card can go face, which Shocking Wamasu used to be able to do, but it was a common, so they had to nerf that because that was going on too much in Arena, I guess. But yeah, this card is just basically one of the best, if not the best cards in the expansion, in my opinion. I fully expect every single intelligence deck that's not a very, very aggressive, like aggro battle mage deck, and even sometimes those maybe, to play this card. It's just a 1-of, it's easy to fit in, it's just a very powerful effect, very reminiscent of High King Emmerich, except you're always getting that 5 damage, which is pretty crazy, and it can go face too. I'm in love with this card. I think is it too powerful? I don't know. It's a very powerful card, just easy to understand, easy to get the max value from, and just a huge tempo swing for an aggressive deck, and a very potent controlling tool for any control deck. That said, the breakthrough can sometimes be a disadvantage if you don't want to give your opponent cards, but since it's only dealing 5 damage, you can play around that, because the max breakthrough damage you could deal is 4 on a 1 health creature. So if you just make sure your opponent's at 30, if you play this card, the most you could get them down to is 26 if you really don't want to be giving them cards in a control deck. But yeah, Ancano, I think it's the best card we've talked about today in this video by far, and I think it's one of the best cards in the expansion. So that's my initial thoughts on the intelligence cards in Heroes of Skyrim. Love to hear your thoughts, so make sure to leave a comment. Be sure to check out the other colors and the neutrals and the dual attributes as they go up on the channel as well. Hopefully you've enjoyed, and if you did, feel free to leave a like. Feel free to subscribe to the channel for more Legends content every single day. Check out my stream in the description, and I'll see you guys next time.